Georgetown State University.
New Dimensions is made possible in part by New Dimensions membership support and by the Quest for Global Healing Worldwide Citizenship Conference in Bali with Desmond Tutu and Terry Tempest Williams, November 30th to December 9th, 2004, online at crossculturaljourneys.com. Also by Green Blue, to inspire a transformation in the design of human industry, making commercial activity an ecological and socially regenerative force. Online at greenblue.org. Additional funding is provided by UTNI, a magazine of alternative media. Online at utni.com.
It is only through a change in human consciousness that the world will be transformed. The personal and the planetary are connected. As we expand our awareness of mind, body, psyche, and spirit, and bring that awareness actively into the world, so also will the world be changed. This is our quest as we explore new dimensions.
Americans are spending more than $15 billion for alternative health options. Integrative medicine has now entered mainstream medical schools. Psychoneuroimmunology is becoming the medicine of the future, with the discovery of neuropeptides and the clear relationship of the brain with the major organs, bone marrow, and lymph system of the body. It's an exciting time because we stand on the brink of major breakthroughs in medicine that can bring health solutions to the planet. This quest provides the focus for this edition of New Dimensions with our guests, Dr. Candice Burke and Michael Ruff. Candice Burke received her undergraduate degree in biology from Bryn Mawr College and her PhD in pharmacology from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. In 1972, as a graduate student at Hopkins, her discovery of the opiate receptor, a mechanism of cellular communication in the brain, launched a revolution in medical science. In 1982, she became chief of the newly established section on brain biochemistry of the Clinical Neuroscience Branch at the National Institute of Health. She's lectured worldwide on her research and theories of body-mind communication and was featured in a segment of Bill Moyer's PBS series, Healing in the Mind. Currently, Dr. Pert is research professor in the Department of Physiology and Biophysics and conducts age research with her partner Michael Ruff in the laboratory at the Georgetown University Medical Center in Washington, D.C. She's also scientific advisor to Advanced Immunity, which is conducting clinical trials for a new drug for the treatment of AIDS, peptide T, that was invented by Dr. Pert at the NIH. She's the author of Molecules of Emotion, Why You Feel the Way You Feel. Join us for the next hour as we explore the mind-body connection, the body-mind connection, with our guests, Dr. Candice Pert and her partner, Michael Ruff. My name is Michael Toms.
And I'm Justine Willis Toms.
We'll be your hosts. Welcome to New Dimensions. And welcome, Candice and Michael.
Hello, Justine. Michael, thank you.
Yeah, nice to have you here. So let's start at the beginning. When did you first start imagining that you could do research, the kind of research? What led you into the field in the first place?
You mean to be a scientist?
Yeah, how'd that begin?
Well, I was always very curious when I was a child, supposedly. But I think it began when I decided it was more practical to be a biology major than an English major in college. And then I was very interested in psychology and, started moving to integrate biology and psychology in my mind, and then learned that it would be possible to, this was the beginning of, I was very lucky. All my timing was right. Like, what's his name? The guy in the movie,
Mel Gibbs.
Mel Gibbs.
The guy with the movie with the chocolate where he's always in the right place at the right moment.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, Tom Hanks was the character. You may want.
Oh, Forrest Gump?
Forrest Gump. Yeah. I feel like
Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump.
Yeah, like I'm the Forrest Gump of science. So I just happened to be, in 1970 when neuroscience was being born and the very first meeting happened. I was there. There's 212 people now. When the Society for Neuroscience meets, there's 30,000 people. So There's a lot of that stuff
30
where
years,
I
a lot
was
of
just
changes.
in the right place at the right time. I'm learning more humility.
What kind of influence? What were your parents influential, or your school? Where did it come from?
The truth is, it came from my first husband, who was hell-bent on getting a PhD and all that graduate stuff, and thought that that was very important, that I not be a housewife, that I have an advanced degree and work hard.
So it was a different time.
Yeah.
Different time.
Right.
Michael, how about you? How did you become associated with Candice? And
It's just one of those amazing twists of fate where your life goes down a rocky path. And at the time, you think it's going to be the greatest change of direction. I had just kind of recently arrived at the NIH as a young research fellow. I had finished some studies in Europe and had arrived at the NIH, and I had actually started thinking a little bit about the mind-body problem. And I was aware that Candice Pert was this famous neuroscientist who resided at the NIH, and I had been aware of some of her work but had not met her, and was with a good friend of mine, and we're at one of these Friday, beer drinking social type clubs where a lot of scientists gathered, and I was just kind of like hanging out talking to people, and this woman walked in with her baby on the back and sidled up to the bar, and I think she took a beer for herself and a shot of tequila for the baby. I said, that must be Candice. We introduced ourselves and started a conversation, and it's basically continued for 20 years since then. That was my first introduction. Sort of professionally, just kind of talking about some of the ideas and a little bit about the work that scientists do. When you put them together in the room, we sort of say, what are you doing? What are you up to? And it's a great way of learning what else is going on outside of your particular disciplines and picking up a few ideas. And that's one of the great advantages of the NIH. There's some 5,000 scientists, and we all kind of come together like a giant anthill.
I just figured it out. It's like, okay, so the marriage between biology and psychology, which was the hot thing in 1970, and I got to be a part of that, and that was the birth of neuroscience, and that was all great. But meeting Michael, that was the body piece that had been left out, and everything was, consciousness was the brain, and the brain is the center of the universe. And Michael was, and still is, an immunologist and virologist, and it was this magical synthesis of both of our worlds of science that turns out to be really incredible, and more incredible now because one of the new breakthroughs that's happened in straight science, but it's so unbelievable. It revolutionizes how we think about ourselves, that we talked about in Mendocino at the Cancer Center, where we had this dialogue that we're coming
And that was
back.
just recently in the summer of 2004.
Correct. The summer of 2004, on July 11th, we had a conversation and a dialogue in front of these incredibly sophisticated Californians. We're scared of these Californians. We're East Coast people.
Did you have to get your immune shots to come?
Passports in Northern California?
No, we were excited to come. This is like a dream come true, because I had been here before with... had a meeting here with Lanny Myers, who's a famous musician all over and is a contributor to the Mendocino Music Festival. And we launched my CD that you know about, Justine, that I'm working on.
Right, I've had a little experience with it, and we want to talk about that in a moment. But going back to this meeting it was a cancer research group.
Yeah, it's called the Cancer Research Center of Mendocino County. And it's a kind of a self-help, self-actualized group of people who, try to figure out the most advanced ideas. And they hosted us to come and have this dialogue.
So what came for you that excited you? What new idea or what new information came through for you, just being in a group, let's say a circle with the people together, something new comes out of that? Because you seem really up and really happy.
Well, it's the whole thing is a magic healing. I can't explain it. I feel I've had this certainty that, the truth is that I don't speak for you, Michael. I need a lot of healing. Whatever thing was going on in my early formative years, I need a tremendous amount of healing. And what's been happening to me magically, I'm being divinely led to the healing that I need. And then as I complete my own personal healing, then our AIDS drug will then be manifest in the world. And there was something, in the whole psychology, the biology of myself, where it was stuck, and it was a long birth process, and now it's being born. So I guess the most exciting thing to me was the fact that I talked about what I'm very interested in right now is understanding human beings, and I've been thinking about them as white light, how we're each a complex sum of a number of different frequencies, different personalities, different, we're a network of energies, as it were. And of course, Michael and I, our work about the peptides and the receptors that are kind of harnessing all this together. But I've been thinking a lot about it and thinking about how we're all multiple personalities. And I alluded to the work of the Stones, Hal and Sidra Stone. And then it turned out that they lived close to Mendocino, and we wound up having a little audience with them.
And the Stones are the creator of the dialogue process of having dialogues with the inner selves, yes.
Yes, and I thought that was...
I've been guests on New Dimensions previously.
And that just happened yesterday, and I'm still pretty blown away by that. How miraculously that I happened to even float that at that moment, and it was heard.
I mean, you don't mention their name with every talk that you've ever given, and here you said it then. And
Right.
So there are lots of synchronicities happening, obviously. How about for you, Michael? Are there synchronicities happening for you, too?
Well, it's certainly an exciting spot, and we were very well received at the Cancer Research Center, which is always nice and gratifying. As scientists, we give these kind of turgid technical presentations and
booga science.
Yeah, exactly like that. And so at the end, people line up at the microphone, and they're as likely to throw a tomato at you as applaud. So it's very different to go and give a talk and be sort of warmly received, and then have this dialogue and discussions with people. And always gratified to talk to these types of audiences because I'm dealing with clinicians in many ways. These are people who are therapists or practitioners of various alternative medical types of practices and modalities, and it's a very stimulating discussion because they, for the most part, are interested in what little insights we might have from the laboratory. But I kind of say, well, the laboratory process is very slow, tedious, step by step, and if medicine was to proceed that way, we'd all be sort of living back in the Stone Age, and it really takes a clinical advance and a leap of faith, and so I'm kind of inspired by the work that people are doing. And so if you say to me, people come in and this is a modality, or this is an intervention, or this is a practice, and then I see these types of changes in my clients, in my patients, then I'm very interested, or how is this occurring, how can we generalize this, and how can we bring this into the broader practice of medicine as it occurs in this country. I work at an East Coast medical school, and we are one of the few, not the first, but one of the few that are actually coming on with a teaching program in alternative complementary medical practices, and we're trying to bring that into the level of teaching at to the medical student class, and they get a few hours of this, so it's not like it's a significant aspect of their training yet, but this is the way it's beginning, and this is the way it will proceed. This little dialogue that is occurring from small community centers like this to the information, and then back to the major medical centers to try to spread or transform and implement some of these ideas.
So it's like transformation really coming from the bottom up and from the margins.
Yeah, very much, because, of course, medicine doesn't have the answers, and people suffer from long-term chronic disease and illnesses. This is what interests us, and we're interested in the fundamental nature of illness, and I don't think the nature of illness is something happens to us like an extrinsic event. Actually, the origins of illness probably often come from within.
Well, I find this very exciting because you're really having an interdialogue then with the practitioners and the scientists, and usually that's very separate. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the most amazing thing about the people of the center, I mean, they are really sophisticated, hip people. So, I mean, I don't think we taught them anything that they didn't already know. I mean, for me, it was exciting to dialogue with you, Mike, because there's this, I mean, the new work in one sentence is that, the stem cells in the bone marrow actually can give rise to every single cell in your body, including neurons in your brain, and that there's a part of your brain that's making new cells every day.
So you're talking about regeneration?
Exactly, like your brain is constantly renewing this idea that people have to always be stuck in old patterns and think the same thoughts every day. No longer true.
Well, that your brain cells are dying, you can't get new ones.
Exactly. In fact, the new research suggests that unless you're addicted to nicotine, marijuana, cocaine, morphine, or unless you're depressed, you have this constantly replenishing supply of new neurons being born.
Sounds right on to me. We're speaking with Candice Burke and her partner Michael Ruff, who are exploring the body-mind connection. We're going to continue that exploration in just a moment. My name is Michael Toms.
And I'm Justine Willis Toms.
You're listening to New Dimensions. Our guests are Candice Burke and her partner Michael Ruff, and we're exploring the body-mind connection.
Candice and Michael, you were talking earlier about some of the surprises that happened when you were with this cancer resource group in Mendocino, on the coast of Mendocino County in California. Were there other surprises that came up for you?
I think I was surprised at how incredibly knowledgeable the people were, particularly about the environmental roots of cancer. I wish the people in Washington, D.C. who run things were as sophisticated in appreciating it. And it kind of fits something that Michael and I had been working on for many years. It was, in fact, our first paper that we published in Science magazine, which was called Origins of Small Cell Lung Cancer. And we showed that even though it's called lung cancer and it's associated with heavy smoking, the actual cells, the tumor cells, really look a lot like cells that are called macrophages and cells that are really immune cells and cells that start their life in the bone marrow. And it was kind of at an early birth of the whole psychoneuroimmunology thing, and the idea is really interesting right now that it's a repair process gone awry. So for this form of lung cancer, most of the people are heavy smokers, and so they're needing to make more and more cells to repair their lung. And so it goes, if you're exposed to a lot of herbicides in the valley or whatever, then you may be making lots of extra cells to repair this or that tissue, and it's those extra stem cells that go awry that are actually the ones that become the tumor cells. And then, yeah.
So we all carry cancer, potentially cancer cells in the body. Is that true?
Sure, we are. I mean, everybody has 20 little tumors every day that our whole way of regenerating. I mean, this idea that we're not the same people that walked into this little room a half an hour ago. We've made millions and millions of cells since then, but those cells know exactly where to go and how many to make and how to fit themselves in and how to repair themselves. And the source of these cells ultimately is all from the bone marrow, and that's a real new paradigm way to think about cancer. And people are thinking about cancer in this way, that it's really cells that are kind of part of the normal healing process going awry.
Michael?
Well, this aspect of healing is very interesting, and in some ways, Candice, it's interesting, those points you're making. The early development of cancer many times shows a lot of similarity to tissue repair types of processes. And in some of my thinking, as we've had this kind of dialogue and this notion of like what's the cause of disease or what's going on in disease, we have this old idea from Walter Cannon at the turn of the century that the body has this natural wisdom, and this regenerative capacity that you are referring to is actually quite extreme. And as you say, all of the cells and tissues in our body turn over in a period of weeks to months. So we are always constantly regenerating and reinventing ourselves. And so then the question is, if this process wants to go forward normally in itself, maybe we can think of that the cause of disease and this healing process is interrupted along the way, or somehow it kind of goes awry. And then that gets us into a consideration, I think, of the psychological basis of disease. Ernie Rossi had written this book years ago called The Psychobiology of Mind-Body Healing, which stimulated a lot of my thinking at the beginning. And it kind of gets into this theory of emotions as you've framed it. So the biochemical emanations of our brain and body, as we also understand, are also chemicals that interface with the immune system, direct and guide the immune system, the same chemicals that are responsible for our feelings, our thoughts, our pleasures, our fears, our angers.
You mean the molecules of emotion?
The molecules of emotion, as you describe them, in your book, are also tying into our immune system and either promoting our healing or perhaps subverting our healing processes. And so we have different biochemical states, different states of mind.
So I want to clarify it for our listeners and for myself. So we're talking about the body. The body actually emanates chemicals that are comparable to the chemicals or drugs that we prescribe every day, that medicine is prescribing every day. Those chemicals are outside the body, but we have these chemicals inside the body to do this all the time naturally.
This is a great idea. Yeah, it's called the natural pharmacopoeia. All of these drugs that we're taking as drugs from pharmaceutical companies mimic chemicals in our body in some way or another. And I like to speculate, in some future state of supreme enlightenment, we're not going to reach for the pharmaceutical cabinet on the shelf in the bathroom. We're just going to induce the proper emotional, meditative state of mind, state of consciousness, and we will bring forth these chemicals in our bodies in the right amounts at the right time. This is some vision of medicine in the future, but we're starting to go in that direction. And so,
much to the chagrin of some pharmaceutical companies, huh?
Yes and no. I'm sort of like on both sides, and I don't want to be too absolutist. I mean, certain drugs really are miracle drugs and do great things, but we've also already noted, most of what goes wrong we can't treat or can't cure yet. So we really need to take a big leap forward to make some progress here.
But this idea that is amazing, not just the legal drugs, but of course the substances, it's the hottest area in neuroscience right now is understanding endocannabinoids, the brain and body's own...
Endocannabinoids?
Endocannabinoids.
Okay.
I mean, endorphins, the brain's own morphine and the body's own morphine. That was hot in the 80s or the 90s. Now, the endocannabinoids, the brain and body's own marijuana ligands that bind to our internal marijuana receptors. In everything.
Well, John Ashcroft should appreciate that.
I guess he would be against it.
Against the body doing it naturally. Let's go in there and stop that from happening.
Right. Even his brain has it. Assuming he has a brain. Yes.
I want to go a little bit into the CD that you put out, because I know, Candice, that you have said that it would be helpful for us to do some guided meditation every day, or do actual focused meditation, not just emptying the mind, but talk about what you mean by that.
Right. Yes, in my own personal healing journey and in all the incredible people I've been exposed to in the book tour that never ends, I have been really captured by the power of the imagination. I mean, what we believe becomes true. What we imagine and what we can see, what we can visualize truly can become true. And I now can understand the neurophysiological mechanisms for this. If we're creating, unless we're depressed or stuck in an addiction, we're constantly creating new cells, new neuronal networks. I mean, that is powerful, and we should we brush our teeth every morning. why can't we spend 20 minutes like thinking about what kinds of new images are
what
going to be?
What kind of a day we're going to have?
Yeah.
We're going to have a good day today?
Yeah.
Or no, we're going to have a bad day today. That's going to be an awful day today. And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
What do we get? We get what we're looking for, right?
Exactly. And so, and then I've also been very much, as you get more and more into the mechanisms, and there's the endorphin and the endocannabinoids and the cortisol and the this and the that, and you know that it can't really work that way. It really kind of works in a holistic, vibrational, almost like a musical whole. And I've just become more and more aware of the power of music without even thinking about it, how it can, whether it's by putting us in numerous emotional states or allowing parts of our personality to connect to other parts. So I've worked hard on this CD, and I think it's going to be incredible because it's got really powerful, scientifically designed music, and it has imagery, and it has affirmations, and it's put together in a way with a little booklet, so you don't have to be a PhD in biochemistry, but you can kind of get the main ideas of the new developments. And I'm excited. It's been healing me. It's very weird. Every time I do a little presentation of it or work on the script, I come out of it and there's something going on here. It just seems very powerful.
Well, I think that sound, I think for millennia, human beings have used sound as healing.
Yes.
And it goes back to the Vedas and before, and way back into ancient traditions, talking about the healing power of sound.
Right.
And it just morphs into music. And what was the sound of the Big Bang? Was that, and where did light come from? Where it came from out of sound?
Yes, and you can transpose. One of the things we've done in this with Lanny Myers, who has conceptualized some of these astounding ideas. There's a lot of discussion of the chakras, and by tradition, we have the chakras going from the lower vibration, red at the root chakra, up to violet at the top of the head chakra. We have this range, and it's kind of like a tradition, but we did some accurate calculations, and we accurately converted the vibrational frequency of light, and we found the harmonics in the range of music, and we made an accurate scale. It's not C, middle C is not red. It's something else. And we had those calculations were done, and the music is composed around that. Chakras are powerful.
So, like the first chakra is usually interpreted as being about survival. Second chakra, sexual energy. So how would you interpret? How would those shift?
Well, there's a weird thing. One of the things, I've mentioned it in the book, in Molecules of Emotion, it was just one of these blowaway things I learned, was that the chakras, I'd never heard of the chakras. They don't have chakras on the East Coast. Although they're moving up on the charts.
That's the problem.
Right. But what happened was we realized that the classical chakras are actually nodal points where there's a lot of release of neuropeptides. And Mike made the point really well in Mendocino, how we are a psychosomatic network. We're all networks of cells, not just brain cells, but cells that are everywhere.
Let's talk more about that in just one moment. We're here with Dr. Candice Burke and Dr. Michael Ruff. My name is Justine Willis-Toms.
And I'm Michael Toms, and you're listening to New Dimensions.
New Dimensions is made possible in part by New Dimensions membership support and by the Monticello Dialogues, 6 hours on CD with architect, designer, and eco-visionary William McDonough in conversation with Michael Toms. New Dimensions Radio, uncommon wisdom for unconventional times. Call 1-800-935-TAPE or online at www.newdimensions.org.
Our guests are Candice Burke and Michael Ruff, and we're exploring the body-mind connection.
You're talking about the nodes and the chakras as vibratory centers, so to speak, that can be interpreted into musical tones. Is that what you're saying?
Well, partly. I think the key realization that we had a while ago is that the positions of the classical chakras just happen to perfectly correspond to places that Western neuroscientists have found a tremendous enrichment of various neuropeptides. So, for example, the solar plexus is one of the chakras, and that is just loaded with nerves that are secreting probably 100 different neuropeptides, and it's a very vibrant, dynamic area. So this is just so interesting. And we introduced the nodal point term to reflect the idea that we really are this communication network of information molecules. And you had some eloquent things to say about that.
Not to leave out the rest of the body and the immune system too, the sort of like neurocentric focus, because one of the the revelations of the last 15 years of science research in these chakra areas also are well populated by cells of the immune system in many cases. There are billions of immune cells in your gut, in your solar plexus, and this like thymus upper chest area as well. And the concept comes out of systems theory, where all of these different anatomical sites, which have been recognized in other medical traditions as sites of energy localization, are areas of information processing. And then in the systems model, the notion is that information is exchanged freely throughout the body, and we think of information as being transported multiple ways, but we're talking about this neuropeptide network, but it could also as well be transmitted energetically. And so there's shared information, and there's information that's being sent and received, and the vehicle for doing that may be these neuropeptidergic chemicals, so there's talk back and forth. And then another aspect of the network notion, which I find very powerful and profound, is, how do you get into the network? So body workers come to me and they say, I'm like working on my client's foot, or I'm working on their toe, or I'm working on their elbow, or there are these auricular points along the ear that are stimulated in acupuncture. Network systems theory says once you're into the network, you're in. So you can jump in at any point. Maybe you can jump in by doing physical, somatic types of manipulations, which then provide energetic and even chemical stimulation over these various chakras. And then the information travels throughout the body mind. So we're not brain centric. We're not in the front of the cortex centric. We're really trying to have a model of integration between the brain and the body. So when we go into states of mind, we're also going into states of consciousness in the body as well. And it's this kind of moving these different states of consciousness around, which is really, it seems to me, what we're trying to do, which is the enlivening kind of process. And people talk about being stuck, so you want to get unstuck and you want to move the energy around. You want to move the consciousness around. And it doesn't matter where you jump in, you can get a hold of it and have these.
Right. And I was excited about this idea of one of the states of consciousness that hopefully we are encouraging people to spend some time in with the CD is a healing state, a state where interrupted healing can resume and go to completion. This is a concept we've thought about, interrupted healing. I mean, as we are much more like a flickering flame, and you can imagine, we do have this energetic property where all the cells are being formed and going to the right spot. And what if the healing state, I mean, the music conducting it, and what you were saying, Justine, I mean, I can't quite totally explain it or articulate it, but we know now that these receptors for these neuropeptides, it's old paradigm to call them lock and key. That doesn't mean it's not true, and it's a great way to visualize it. It's very Newtonian. But we know now that these receptors actually vibrate. We know they vibrate 0.1 to 100 hertz, and that as they vibrate, they're pumping ions and electrical changes across
so they're
the
actually they're waves. They're radio waves.
Yeah.
So it's actually a sound.
Yeah, well, I mean, parts of our body actually make sounds. I mean, we don't only hear with our ears. There's molecules in every part of our body that respond to the sounds, but somehow the emotions, we don't really understand the emotions yet. We're thinking about how they probably have some kind of frequency and they have some energetic properties that we haven't quite
So
yet.
it's kind of like, I don't say a hologram. I'm thinking of a hologram, holographic idea where it's all connected.
Yes.
Well, what I'm getting to...
Is that like what we're talking about?
Yeah,
what Mike was talking about?
definitely.
Yeah, okay.
It's all connected. Right. That's what he was talking about,
What I get from listening to the two of you, I wrote down this phrase, we are awash in conversation, in internal, inside of us. We are awash in conversation. So I see it as a flow. Right. It's not like something that we can go step 1, step 2, step 3, but we're just this tidal wave of conversations, and the whole body is thinking, so to speak. It's not just located in the head, but we're whole thinking, walking, washing around conversation, and it's a matter of helping us to focus that on the ways towards healing. If the healing has been interrupted, we're always having something bombarding us that's causing some sort of discomfort. So to get more into the healing mode.
Right. That's it. And we don't, it's like, it all happens naturally and we don't even have to try so hard. It's almost like we've been, the strange modern lives that we lead, where we don't pay attention to the divine and we don't have ritual and we don't have, the simple life that our body minds were designed for. We do have the same bodies that people had 30,000 years ago. So it could be it's much simpler. And I lost the thread.
The body is not just
the awash. I was going to say that all of these conversations are going on, and only one, hopefully, sometimes we have a couple bubble into our consciousness. And I've shown a slide a lot that it's sort of like it always gets a great laugh, but it's true that thoughts do travel up, and the role of emotions is to prioritize all this barrage of incoming sensory information and to decide which we should pay attention to, usually for our own survival, because most of the time we're acting.
I think the phrase that you use, thoughts bubble up, come from up. They're not coming down. So we've been used to thinking that thoughts come down from the brain, but you're suggesting that thoughts really emerge from below.
Good, exactly. And it's only when they get to, let's not knock the brain too much, because that's when they get into verbalization and they get into, you can actually verbalize them, but they are coming, exactly, they are bubbling up from
So like the brain is almost like the allocator. It's kind of like it's the one that kind of separates and distributes, where all this coming in and the brain kind of acts like some kind of a distributor.
Right. The brain figures...
even at the lower levels of the body. If you think how the information works, light comes in through your eyes. There are 7 synapses till that image gets back into your brain. And in each one of those synapses, information processing can occur. You can see things and you cannot see. People can look at things and not see them. And I'm sitting right next to them. Don't you see that? No, they haven't seen that. So the body and the mind... All the time. Yeah, this is an amazing aspect of how...
You see that jar of milk in the... Right.
Yeah, or my kid's looking for something, he can't find it anywhere, and I'm like, right there. So your expectation, what you believe, what you think, and how you're filtering, each one of these little synapses is a filter. Some things get through, other things don't. And that decision is made at the very local level. So this system starts at the individual cells of the body, goes up, and from the brain as well goes down. There are products, emanations of your immune system, spleen, little chemicals that course through your blood. They get to the meninges of your brain. They talk to certain cells, and then signals are sent into your brain. Is my super ego sitting on the top of my head aware of this?
Well, you don't have a super ego.
Right. So where are these little voices that are coming and telling me what to do, and who's running the show? And I am not always in control of my body. Sometimes my body is in control of me. We know this from our teenagers.
Here's what the brain does. The role of the brain, you're asking. The role of the brain is to receive all the incoming information, bubbling up all the way, and when it gets all the way up to the frontal cortex, then and only then do we know who to blame.
That's the truth is spoken.
Now, what about the
Your brain is for making up stories,
Now, what about the neurotransmitters that we hear so much about the brain, neurotransmitting information to the different aspects of the body, different cells in the body?
Yeah, well, neurotransmitters are real, and they're all called informational substances now, and probably 98% of them are peptides, and 1% of them are steroids like estrogen and testosterone, and another 1% are the classical neurotransmitters that are chemically, they're more like modified amino acids, and those are, serotonin and acetylcholine, and yes.
Those are the fun ones.
Well, they're all, I think they're all, I think it's all an accident how things got discovered. I don't think,
No. It's interesting. I'm thinking of the research on the heart, and particularly cellular biology, and how they've discovered that heart transplant patients, they get someone's heart, and in the heart is when they start saying things and thinking things. And actually embedded in the cells of the heart is a memory from the other. I mean, what about that? What are we talking about there?
There's a literature that's, I don't know, maybe 20 years old in Western, but it went back even earlier on the Russians, and this notion of like conditioning the immune system. So you can take just cells and you can condition them to respond to individual stimuli in the same way, we think about the dog salivating in response to the bell. Once he learns the meat and the bell, he just hears the bell and he salivates. You can do little experiments on cells in culture, and they will have that same type of memory. Now, that's a complicated information processing to occur for there to be this type of conditioning, but you can demonstrate at the level of the individual cells. So all of these little cellular elements are little computers in dialogue, and they are processing, storing, and remembering information. So in fact, injuries and traumas are stored in the, you think you've got this recollection of the time you fell off your bicycle because your brother took a stick through the spoke and you fell, and all that anger and the broken arm and all of that. And that's encoded in your brain. It's encoded in your emotion, but it's also encoded in your tissues as well. And so when we're talking about true healing and states of mind and accessing all of that, we need to recapitulate that whole emotional, physical milieu. And in that state, part of the thinking here, as we're articulating it today, it's when it's fully experienced, when an emotional injury is fully experienced at all of these different levels and states, then it's subject to reprogramming. Then you can complete the healing. Then you can repair the tissue, repair the psychic damage, all of that. It's not just the physical injury. Right. And too often we're just dealing with the level of the physical injury.
Right. But the piece there, that was great. But the piece is these receptors, learning and memory occurs wherever a receptor is, and that's been proven by leading lights of straight neuroscience.
So you're saying they're all through the body?
They're all through the body. So wherever you have...
so if you have a scar, there's a memory there.
Oh, yeah. And it's not even like the scar sat there forever. It actually...
remembers that it's there.
It continues to be a scar. And this... I actually had my own interrupted healing great epiphany on this scar that I have on my the top that I got when I was 4 years old, on the top of my nose. And it actually, in thinking about it and going through a process at Esalen and all, and it sort of came alive and got red and had some healing and was less of a scar than it had been, for 40 or for 50 years. But so I think the whole idea that we're coming up here with the CD and all, it doesn't have, you can have the whole left brain scientific approach, and we can talk about receptors and molecules and neuropeptides, and we can make the chemical structure of them all. But then maybe we can just skip it and jump over all that by using just the musical frequencies and our own imagination and our own innate ability to relax and our own tendency to heal ourselves. We want to heal ourselves. Our bodies are constructed to heal ourselves. Maybe we can short circuit it, and that's what I was trying to do with the CD, and just give people, it's actually called psychosomatic wellness, healing your body, mind. It's not about sickness. It's about optimal health for people.
We're talking with doctors Candice Burke and Michael Ruff, who are working at the Georgetown University Medical Center in Washington, D.C., doing research on the immune system and a lot of other things. Particularly, it's really interesting because we're getting into the area where if we can regenerate cells, we can regenerate body parts, and maybe the immortality is possible. And so we're going to continue our conversation in just a moment. My name is Michael Toms.
And I'm Justine Willis-Toms.
You're listening to Dimensions. Our guests are Dr. Candice Burke and Dr. Michael Ruff, and we're exploring body-mind connections and all of its permutations. And it just, as I mentioned before we took that break, brings up the idea if we can regenerate cells, we can regenerate body parts. And I made the comment just before we came back about if crabs can do it, why can't people do it? Michael, what about that?
Well, we probably have more regenerative capacity than we think. I don't know if we can get to the point of regenerating our arms, but I imagine that we can. So I don't say that it's past us. What I'm kind of thinking about just in the current moment is what states of mind, what states of consciousness would optimize our health and optimize our recovery from illness, to try to be practical. And this is one of the ideas that we're thinking about. And it's a question we've discussed among ourselves. And I notice I'm sitting in your studio and I look back over your shoulders and I see your picture with the Dalai Lama. And I was at a conference and I had asked him this question. I said, look, I'm at this medical school and we're interested in this. What's the state of mind? And he said, oh, well, people just get sick. And I said, like, you mean like we catch a cold? And he said, yeah, you just catch a cold. And I said, no, that's not the case, because we know from studies of medical students, we can give everybody the same amount.
He picked a fight with His Holiness.
I picked a fight. We can give the same amount of virus, and some people will and some people won't. So there's like the individual milieu, as Pasteur said. And he said, yeah, you're right. Let me think about it. And then he told a story. He said, look, he was sick and he was traveling through northern India. He was in a lot of pain. But as he was going through these villages and he was looking at the poverty and the suffering of the villagers, he felt tremendous compassion. He is the reincarnation of the Buddha of compassion. And he said, in this moment of feeling great compassion and love for the other people, it was in that moment that his illness, or pain and suffering, was mitigated. And I said, so the answer is to secure ourselves, we need to feel compassion for others. And that was his answer, and I thought that was very profound. So in this feeling of compassion, then maybe it holds a key to our own recovery and regeneration.
Yes.
It's like a feeling when we feel connected to the other rather than separate or isolated from. That's where maybe the beginning of the pain begins.
And this notion of, like I said, I can make an animal sick a million ways. Okay, I can do lots of things to an animal to make an animal sick, but there's very few things that I can do to make an animal recover better. So when I think of illness, I think what we do, what we eat, what we think, our diets, all of this at some point becomes some kind of cumulative toxic burden, maybe, or an impediment to our recovery. And maybe some of these processes of mind can unravel some of that to allow, as I said earlier, this wisdom of the body that Walter Cannon spoke about to just burst forward and complete the recovery.
That's interesting.
So let's talk about the peptide T that you're working on and the AIDS project that you're working on, because this is a huge, huge dilemma in the world today, and it becomes more and more so. And I know
70 million people are affected by AIDS now, I think, in the world.
38. About 38 million people in the world, most of those in sub-Saharan Africa, and there's over 1 million people in the U.S. The numbers are really sad. There's like 2,000 African children a day dying of AIDS. So the numbers are extreme. And so we are still looking for new solutions. We had started thinking about these issues of the mind-body, many years ago, about the time the AIDS epidemic started. And in some ways, it drew us into a solution for this, because we started thinking, well, viruses must have receptors. This was a bit of a novel idea back in 1985 or so when we started to think about this. But we thought if viruses have receptors in the same way that drugs have receptors, if we could find the drug, or the body could make the drug that occupies the receptor, the virus would not bind to the receptor. So this is kind of a mainstream scientific project that we undertook to look for such a compound. Later on, in 1996, the receptors for the HIV virus did become identified, but prior to that, we had come up with a small peptide that's derived from the part of the virus that is actually similar to a body hormone that had been known previously. And so we were able to make a small compound and make it stable. And it turns out to be a very potent drug that blocks virus binding and virus entry. And these new class of drugs called entry inhibitors are just starting to come into clinical practice. Ours was actually the first. It's been in clinical studies for many years, and there are some positive results from some recent clinical studies that are being reported in the literature. So we're excited about this. It still has a ways to go, but it's non-toxic, and it is continuing to be studied.
I agree with everything, except it still has a ways to go. And I found it in my friends who helped me create reality and formulate the creation of reality. I mean, the only thing that needs to happen now is the actual commercialization of this drug, which has such a...
When you say that, what do you mean, the commercialization of the drug?
Well, at this point, as Michael said, we ran a very small trial. It's been published in the journal Peptides. It showed very promising results. It actually flushed the blood cells of virus, made some of the virus go out of the blood cells. The commercialization just means at this point, a group of people have to share the vision and believe it's time to put the millions of dollars together to run the clinical trial that can prove scientifically with placebo-controlled data that the drug would be useful. And as Mike said, it's non-toxic, it's easy to manufacture, it doesn't need refrigeration. It might be something really, really, we've spent most of our scientific life on this, and we believe it's something that will be very helpful. But we're there. I feel we're there, and I feel with
all the billions of dollars we're spending on research. I'm thinking how many billions we spend on cancer research,
right,
and all the other billions we're spending on. It seems to me that a few millions should be available for this kind of exploration.
Well, we're very hopeful. We have a grant. We actually have applied for a grant from the National Institutes of Mental Health, where the original discovery was made, that would run a really nice study at Georgetown University. And I think the process is working. It took a while for the science to catch up with this intuitive, inventive leap.
Yes.
And it's
isn't that often the case?
Apparently,
if one looks at the history of science, it often is the case.
And that's what your book that you wrote 9 years ago, Molecules of Emotion, is about. That you go with that intuition, and then you got to walk up the mountain again with all the steps that prove it. But it's like this gut feeling, and then it works out. But
before we wind up here, there was a quote that I wanted that you came up with. The science at its core is a spiritual endeavor.
Right.
What does that mean?
Yeah, and I think it also says the heart of science is feminine is also in there. Yeah, you're discovering truth. The science, that's what it's about. It's the pursuit of truth, and what is more spiritual than that? That's what God is about, the real laws of the universe and truth, I think.
So you're talking about core truth, relative truth.
Yeah, real truth.
So where do you see your work taking you now? Where are you going with this?
Back to Mendocino.
Oh, please do come. to continue getting the funding to roll out with what it is that you know works.
Hopefully we are on the cusp of manifesting the AIDS drug to the people that need it, allowing us to then devote the rest of our lives to the scientific study of new paradigm medicine treatments. That's where we see ourselves going.
Yes.
Well, this is another quote that I'll wind up with. If you're not on the edge, you're taking up too much room. You guys are obviously on the edge, and that's a great place to be. So
Glad we haven't fallen over yet.
Yeah.
Hanging on the edge. Our guests have been Drs. Candice Pert and Michael Ruff, and we thank you for being with us. It's been great having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Justine. It's great.
And if you'd like more information about their work, well, one way you can do it is you can get the Sounds True tape, which is Your Body is Your Subconscious Mind by Candice Pert, and also the CD, Psychosomatic Wellness, and this is available through CandicePert.com. That's Candice Pert, CandaCe.com. That's the website for more information about the work that Candice Pert and Michael Ruff are doing. New Dimensions is produced by New Dimensions Radio in Ukiah, California, USA, and is made possible by listener contributions and by the membership support of Friends of New Dimensions. If you'd like to connect with us on the internet, and we'd love to hear from you, our website address is newdimensions.org. Executive producer is Michael Toms. Managing producer is Justine Willis-Toms. Senior producer, Neil Harvey. Post-production editor, Catherine Vibert. Director of Operations, Beck Kageyama. Announcers are Catherine Vibert and Dan Drayson. My name is Michael Toms.
And I'm Justine Willis-Toms.
On behalf of all the staff at New Dimensions whose efforts make this program happen, and all those who are members of Friends of New Dimensions, as well as members of our affiliate stations, we're wishing you well. This is program number 3055.
New Dimensions Radio is an independent producer supported by listener contributions. Since 1973, New Dimensions Radio has produced programming covering the history of the future. For more information and a complimentary copy of the New Dimensions newsletter, or to order an audio copy of today's program using American Express, Visa, Discover, or MasterCard, call 1-800-388-8273. That's 1-800-388-TAPE. Or visit our website, newdimensions.org.
New Dimensions is made possible in part by New Dimensions membership support and by the Quest for Global Healing Worldwide Citizenship Conference in Bali with Desmond Tutu and Terry Tempest Williams, November 30th to December 9th, 2004, online at crossculturaljourneys.com. Also by Green Blue, to inspire a transformation in the design of human industry, making commercial activity an ecological and socially regenerative force. Online at greenblue.org. Additional funding is provided by Utne, a magazine of alternative media. Online at utne.com.
Each week, New Dimensions explores the social, political, scientific, environmental, and spiritual frontiers with some of today's foremost social innovators, thinkers, scientists, and creative artists.
Hi, I'm Jim Austin, author of Zen and the Brain and Chase Chance and Creativity. Next time on New Dimensions, I'll be talking about consciousness and meditation.
Hey, baby. Go ahead on, baby. Go ahead. Light up the town. Do anything your little heart desire. Just remember, I'll still be around. And baby, you know, I think I told you this maybe 1,000 times or more. But I know. See, I know that one day you're going to miss me. And you're going to come knocking. I'm saying, knocking on my door. Hey, girl, time is on my side. Oh, yes, it is. Time is on my side. See, I got some real love, the kind that you need. But you come running back, like I said you would, baby. You come running back. I won't have to cry no more. You come running back to me. Hey, time is on my side. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, y'all.
Mr. Norman, that's just terrific.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Just terrific. And our thanks to Karen Tallhurst, too, your accompanist.
Oh, thank you, Karen.
Have you ever met these guys that made the song really big, the Rolling Stones?
No, I saw Mick once on Broadway, but he was too busy to talk, so.
Do you have more music ahead of you in your life and career?
Oh, man, yes. I have so much. I still got a lot to say.
Well, it's your time, Mr. Norman.
I hope so.
Mr. Norman, awfully nice talking to you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Scott.
Jimmy Norman in New York. His first nationally distributed album is now out, Little Pieces.
Talking about the truth. Talking about the truth.
And to hear full-length songs from Jimmy Norman's new album, you can visit our website, npr.org.